Hi everybody, it's Emily Murphy and welcome to Fireplace, where we bring the holy fire from the Ignite team into your very home. And let's talk about prayer. Because during this time of quarantine and isolation, we're often told that, this is a time where we can pray more, we can, develop our relationship with God. But honestly, what does that even mean and what does that look like? So for starters, what is prayer? Most of the time when people talk about prayer, they think of certain words that they might have said when they were in school or in church, like Our Father or Hail Mary, and maybe you put your hands like this or something like that. And prayer is just sort of talking to God. That's the definition we get quite often when we go into schools and parishes, is people think prayer is talking to God, which it is, partially. It's not the whole story. There's more to prayer than just talking to God. Prayer is a sense of focusing our attention on God. So bringing ourselves into the presence of Him who made everything, Him who is all goodness and all love and all beauty. And that can involve talking to Him, saying things to Him. That also involves listening to Him, letting Him talk to us. You may have heard the analogy before that, you can't really be friends with somebody if you don't actually ever spend any time with them. So prayer is about spending time with God. But that doesn't always look the same. Because we might think in order to be friends with somebody, we have to hang out a certain way, or we have to, be physically with them, which of course, in these circumstances, we definitely can't be physically with friends. But there are other ways that you can communicate. My friend Mary and I, we are, Facebook Messenger videoing all of the time, which is very complicated. We can't just use Skype. I don't know why we have to complicate things. But we are seeing each other in that way and communicating in that way. We're reading the same book at the same time. We're communicating and sharing that experience that way. But it does look different for different friendships. When my friend Isabel moved away, years and years ago, we decided that the best way for us to communicate was actually by handwritten letter. Why? Because we were weird teenagers who really loved the 1800s, and we decided we wanted to be like people from the 1800s, so we wrote letters to each other. So even though I didn't actually physically talk to her, I was still in communication with her. It's the same with our relationship with God. It's not going to look the same from person to person. In fact, it's not going to look the same day to day, even with the same person. There are different ways that we can communicate with God. There are different ways that we can focus on Him in our times of prayer. In fact, there are three main ways that the church describes we can spend time in prayer with God and we can focus on God. Three main methods that we can use. The first is called vocal prayer. Vocal prayer is the prayer that most people think of when they think of prayer. This is, your Our Father, your Hail Mary. This is the sort of prayers that you memorize or can read off of a sheet, whether you're actually saying them with your tongue and your lips or you're just saying them in your head. Vocal prayer is the sort of talking to God. Well, it's a bit like when I said my friend Isabel moved away and I wrote letters to her, right? All words, just completely words, everything I want to say to you, fill it up in an envelope and send it off. That's a bit like vocal prayer when we're just sort of telling God everything that's on our hearts and minds, just talking to Him. And this is a good way of praying if you're kind of new to prayer and you're just like, well, I'll use this quarantine to pray more. How do I do that? Because it's not just about sort of imagining some big guy that you've never seen before, but it's more about focusing your senses on that God. So, you may be able to hear the noises of the street outside, but you can also hear your voice saying, Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. So it's really useful to help focus your body on God. The second way of praying that the church talks about is called meditative prayer. And this is using our minds to focus on God. So vocal prayer used our bodies to focus on God, but now meditative prayer is using our minds. This can involve any number of mental processes. So you can be praying with your imagination. If you sort of close your eyes and imagine yourself with Jesus and go through some sort of Bible story with Him or just some sort of daily experience in your life, that would be a form of meditative prayer. This would also involve sort of close reading. So if you maybe read a passage in Scripture and see what stands out to you, start to think about why it might be standing out to you, what God might be trying to tell you through that piece of Scripture. You can also use something like an image, painting, a statue. What strikes you about the statue? What might God be trying to tell you through what strikes you and through what the statue is and or represents? Meditative prayer is a bit like when I said my friend Mary and I are reading the same book at the same time. So when we're doing meditative prayer, it's a bit like reading the same book at the same time, but with God, and listening to what He's trying to say through that book to you. Because He's looking at the text just as much as you are, and He's seeing what good it can work in your lives. And of course, the key with meditative prayer is that we are praying, right? So we're focusing on God. So, if your mind starts to go off on a tangent a little bit, and you start thinking, oh, okay, well, that's a very nice statue of Mary. She's holding a baby Jesus. Oh, he kind of looks like my cousin, Mason. Oh, he's so cute. How old is he now? I wonder how old he is. You can use the image or the text you have or the imaginative train you have in your mind to sort of bring yourself back to God. Yeah, okay, yes, it looks like Mason, but it's Jesus. So that's meditative prayer. So we have vocal prayer, using our bodies to focus on God. Meditative prayer, using our minds to focus on God. And the third type of prayer we have is contemplative prayer, where we actually just bring our whole selves before God and just sort of open up to whatever he gives us. And it's sort of listening to God in the silence. Because God, he's so much bigger than humankind. Sometimes we think about God as just this sort of like big guy in the sky. So if we're listening to him, we expect him to talk with words. But of course, he's more than just a superhuman. He is the life force of this universe. So he speaks in ways that might not be physical words. And we have to be attuned to that. We have to be attentive to that. So we kind of have to shut ourselves off a little bit in order to open up to him. And it can be quite difficult. It can be quite scary. In fact, contemplative prayer and being open to God kind of looks like telling someone who you have a crush on that you like them. It's kind of an odd analogy, but stick with me, because when you say I like you, and then there's that sort of, few seconds of, oh my goodness, what are they going to say back? I've just sort of bared my soul to them, and basically my future decision-making is based on what you may or may not say in the next few minutes. That's what opening up to God looks like. Because we have to put our entire life in his hands. Not my will, but your will be done. Looks like completely letting go. That means letting go of our words. Letting go of what we're thinking about. Letting go of our plans or our hopes for this prayer time, because it is all up to God. Because ultimately, prayer isn't something we do. Prayer is actually a gift from God. He's the one that comes to us. We can't force him down into our souls, but we can open up to him. So I encourage you during this time of quarantine, when you might have a little more time on your hands, to spend some of that time focusing on God, growing your relationship with him. Whether that looks like talking to him in vocal prayer, thinking about him in meditative prayer, or opening up to him in contemplative prayer. You might be surprised the gifts that God will ignite in your hearts.